Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. This is Father Tom Soroka. I'm so glad that you're with us today. Today here in Pittsburgh, it has been absolutely raining, as they say, cats and dogs. I don't know what it's like in your area, but on July 8th, 2025, it seems like in Pittsburgh, we're either going to have really hot weather, 95 Fahrenheit, or we're just going to get poured down with rain. So I hope that you are having good weather. Of course, on our mind also are the absolutely tragic events in Texas, where the floods have killed so many people, over 100, I believe, at this point. And so we are praying for them, and let's do everything that we can to help the survivors and obviously those who are mourning the loss of their family or friends. All right. So you can join in the live conversation. We'd love for you to join us. Go into the chat section right now at youtube.com/Ancient Faith Ministries, or go to facebook.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. Tell us where you're from. Tell us where you're watching from, what you hope to get from today's episode. We're going to talk about men in the Orthodox Church, especially the idea of young men entering the Orthodox Church, especially in light of what might be called the bro culture, that is a thing. We're going to talk a little bit about the history. How did we get to this particular point in our Western culture right now? What does it mean? What does it mean for orthodoxy? And what does it mean for women and for men? So again, we look forward to hearing from you. Go into the live chat and let us know that you are here. Before I introduce our guest, who is joining us from a little bit north of Copenhagen, Denmark, where it is 11 p.m., so we're very grateful for his participation tonight. We also want to remind you, you can send us a text message to 412-206-5012. That's 412-206-5012. We would love to hear from you. And of course, at any time, you can also send us an email at aft@ancientfaith.com. All right, so let's get started. Simon, we're going to ask you to put the first slide up, and we are going to today talk about what we're calling Brothodoxy, a little play on words there, but it is a thing, right? If anybody that spends any time online, you know that there is going to be a certain amount of men, anywhere that they're talking about orthodoxy, whether you are watching videos, whether you are watching, it seems like, the numerous debates that are going on everything under the sun, especially in the religious sphere. This is a kind of an amazing phenomenon, a new phenomenon, where there are many, many debates about doctrine, Christian doctrine, religious doctrine. There are also debates about social issues, whether it be the relationship between men and women. What should the relationship be between men and women? All of these kind of debates are going on, and they seem to have taken the internet by storm. And what we want to do today is we want to look at how we got to this point culturally, how we got to this particular point culturally, because it's important to put a context on that. Just like we talked about last week, and we said, where are we in this particular moment? We are in a particular moment culturally, not only when what it comes to women, but also when it comes to men. And again, I want to let's go ahead and welcome our guest, Paul Robson, is from the organization that he leads called Maniphesto. And this particular organization specializes in bringing men together, talking about issues that are important to men. And Paul, welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. Paul, maybe you can't hear us right now. Can you hear us okay?
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was told
That's
there was
okay.
a little bit of an echo, so I hope it's not too bad at the moment.
Okay, no problem. It may be that if you were listening to the show via YouTube, there's a delay there, so it's better to listen to the live feed that is being sent to you, okay? But again, welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. I'm so glad that you're with us today. You're going to provide, I think, an important perspective because you and I met briefly yesterday to talk about these issues, and we certainly don't want to ignore anyone's perspective on this particular issue. I know that some people feel very strongly about men in the culture and also men in the culture of the Orthodox Church. We're going to look at some issues here, but as I said, I want to start by talking about how we got here in this particular culture. So Simon, I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide here. The next slide is a quote from a movie that was made maybe about 20 years ago, and that is Fight Club. Now, Fight Club might be considered one of the cultural, I would say, points where men started to explain how they felt in the world. And there's a very famous line in the Fight Club movie where the two men who are the subjects of this particular movie is, he says, we're a generation of men raised by women. And essentially, the movie goes on to find out that they enter into this contest of manliness. They want to discover and rediscover what it means to be a man. Of course, I'm not endorsing what they did there, but Paul, and we actually didn't talk about this. Have you seen Fight Club, and do you feel like there was something happening there? It's probably a little bit before your time, but that movie tried to express a problem that men were feeling at that particular time.
Yeah, I'm born in '81, and Fight Club was very much a big impact on me. I think it made a massive impact on the culture. And yeah, it touched a lot of people in a very deep way. In some ways, it spoke to something that had been missing in some ways. So absolutely, I think that there was something about that countercultural part. One of the scenes that really touched me hardest was like these guys coming to this house to sign up for Tyler's kind of group. And they were told, like, go away, you can't be in here, you're useless, whatever, I can't use you. And they just stayed there, and they stayed there, and they stayed there. And there's something about that, which when I first came to Orthodoxy some 7 years ago, I think I recognized something about that, actually, that there's a little taste of it. So there is something about that appeals to a part of men that hasn't been prioritized in our culture for a long time, I think.
Right. And we're getting the comments in the live stream that said, what's the first rule of Fight Club? And it's like, don't talk about Fight Club, right? But we are going to talk about Fight Club because, not the movie, but this idea of, what it is to be a man. Now, I'm going to make it very clear because I think that, there might be some people that are going to think, oh, well, there's two guys talking about men, right? So nobody's going to be called on the carpet, right? We're going to dismiss all of the behaviors, but I can assure you, we're going to go through this step by step. Again, this is why we have the chat. If you have an issue, if you have something to say it in the chat, and we will respond as best we can. All right, so let's look at the next slide. So what happened, Paul, was when the issue of manliness came up, right? When the issue of, like, what is it to be a man? Men were feeling marginalized. They were feeling somehow not important, right? And there were a lot of different ways to interpret that. But what happened was there were numerous books that came out about what it was to be a man. And there were actually two viewpoints on it. One was that men should be manly men, right? They should be rugged. They should have resilience. The other one was they should get in touch with their feelings. And so there became a kind of battle of the minds as to what it was to be and what it is to be a man. So, Paul, I'm sure you've gone through a lot of this literature over the last 10 to 15 years. What was your, how did you wade through all of this material?
Well, yeah, this material has actually been a big part of my life in many ways. I grew up in a fairly traditional culture in South Africa, and as a 21, 22-year-old moved to Denmark, probably the most gender equal, progressive country in the entire world. Coming from a Christian background, I became atheist when I came to Denmark and really threw myself out into this entire culture. And that was, in many ways, quite a ride for a long time. And on some areas of my life, I had a lot of success. But increasingly, there was very much something very, very wrong at a very deep level in my soul. And that sent me out on a bit of a spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey went through a whole lot of different areas. But what I found is that the most valuable thing for me, and this was already about 12 years ago, was meeting with other men and talking about the challenges that men face seemed to give me so much more value in understanding myself. And so what started kind of like a little bit of a self-help hobby thing or something like that actually developed into a full-time job for me, where I was really searching for a foundation for male identity. What does it mean to be a man? And for many years, of course, my search was everything but Christianity. and eventually, through some of the books that you actually have up on the screen there, and some, obviously the grace of God coming into my life, Jesus Christ popped up a couple of times, showed himself, and a very long story. But through this passage, actually, I ended up coming to the Orthodox Church and experiencing that the church actually has this foundation for masculinity and manhood. And there's nothing that I could ever do to add to it in any way whatsoever as well.
Sure. Yeah, and we're gonna get there. Right now, what we're just trying to do is create the context, the historical context from the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, to understand how we got to this particular moment. That's really important here, right? All right, so what I want to do, Paul, is I want to watch two videos. Excuse me. Want to watch two videos. They're both very short. They're less than a minute long. The first one is by the infamous but highly popular, maybe not so popular as he was 2 or 3 years ago, but very, very influential, and that is Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate lived in Romania. He basically fled to Romania. It was later uncovered that he had that he had engaged in sex trafficking and so forth, or it was alleged that he had done that. But let's set that aside for 1 second. The popularity of Andrew Tate, whom I had never heard of until a few years ago, when some parents in my parish were telling me my son is watching a lot of Andrew Tate videos, right? So this particular person, I think we can say, probably is one of the most quoted persons in terms of, at that time, what it meant to be masculine. Now, I think you and I can agree, Paul, that this sort of hyper masculinity is not ideal in any way. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, it's certainly not certainly not ideal. Also,
right.
Yeah, it's filling a hole it's filling a need, but it's definitely not. It's swinging way too far over in the wrong direction as well.
Right. So I'm again trying to make a context here. So Simon, if you would please play the first clip of Andrew Tate. I think he's talking here with I can't remember his name. British journals. Go ahead.
Dangerous. They're dangerous. They're genuinely dangerous. This is what's crazy. All these people who talk about toxic masculinity and how bad it is for men to be traditionally masculine. A traditionally masculine man does things he doesn't feel like doing because it is his duty to do them. He charges into the building because it is his duty. Not because he feels like it, because it is his duty. We're now teaching the new generation of men that they don't have duty and they can just act on their feelings and act how they feel, and they don't have to act as a man should. Do you know what happens when you get men who just act how they feel? You get school shooters, you get violence, you get rapists. Men who do not control their emotions are dangerous. If you find a man who is stoic, he's not going to hurt people. He's going to sit and think about his actions very carefully, and he's going to be a good man who protects and provides for his family. You find a man who just acts out on impulse and does whatever he feels like, you're going to find a dangerous man. Sitting here telling men to cry more and act with their feelings and it's okay to feel this way, that way, etc., and have no self-control. That is why we have the problems we have in the world. Absolutely and utterly wrong. So when they talk about toxic masculinity, they have it completely inversed on its head, completely and utterly wrong. We need to be teaching stoicism. We need to be teaching young men to understand that the world is very, very difficult. It's hard to be a man. You're going to feel bad sometimes. You just suck it up and perform anyway. Not to sit there and cry your eyes out or blame other people.
Tough being a woman too in modern society.
It's certainly tough being a woman, but I'm not a woman, so why would I speak on issues I do not understand? I'm a man.
You can feel an empathy for women.
I feel empathy, certainly, but I do not understand their issues.
See, a lot of men come up to me and they admire you. I've got to say, a lot of women I've spoken to don't admire. They think you represent misogyny. They think when they hear you not commit to saying the Taliban shouldn't be banning women from university education, well, why can't he just say that?
Okay, so obviously, I think that was sort of a tame version of Andrew Tate, right? I think that was 2 years ago. And some of his earlier work was really very toxic, for lack of a better term, right? But what he's saying essentially is that men have a role. Now, the way that he relates to women is an entirely different issue, right? Now, what happened was, there was another player in this idea of masculinity, and that is Jordan Peterson. Now, Jordan Peterson is a thinker. He's not a weightlifter, right? He is trying to determine, because he said that he has a tremendous love for young men who felt lost, he wanted to contextualize what it was to be a man, and he actually spoke out against Andrew Tate. So let's watch that clip, and then we're going to begin our discussion of Jordan Peterson.
The rising attractiveness of figures like Andrew Tate speaks to the danger of demoralizing young men, because if you demoralize young men, you make, what would you say, charismatic bad men become much more attractive. Because they're the men who say, well, to hell with all of this idiot constraint and pathetic morality. I'm just going to go and do whatever the hell I want, which is a kind of a narcissistic route to self-aggrandizement and attainment, right? But if the alternative to that is to lay, half comatose in your basement, being depressed about the impending apocalypse, a little bit of attractive criminality beckons as quite the compelling alternative. And that
says that if young men feel like they have a choice between laying in their basement or, doing something that appears to be criminal, and I think, it's sort of a sideways reference to mistreating women and trafficking and so forth, men might be attracted to that. All right. So that brings us to today. Now we're going to talk about several issues here. We're going to talk about what is masculinity, and we're going to talk about men's recent interest in masculinity. Again, I would love to have your comments. Just go into the live chat and YouTube or Facebook. Give us your comments, especially if you have a question for Paul. Please go ahead and direct those questions to him. So, Paul, did I frame as best as I could in the short amount of time that I have, kind of where we got to this particular point, right? And otherwise, men felt demoralized and they felt marginalized in the society, and therefore they reacted. Sometimes they're called reactionaries. They reacted in a particular way by looking for what they felt was masculinity.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of. I think Jordan Peterson put it well in that clip. For me, Andrew Tate and some guys have said in the comments as well, like it sounded fairly reasonable there. I would have obviously put Christianity instead of Stoicism. But if it's about men not, just learning to follow their emotions and to react, that seems to be the mainstream story that's told all the time. Basically, I get contacted by journalists fairly often here in Denmark, and they're really looking to tell two stories and only two stories. So they want to get one of the two. So either they want to talk about men should be crying together and emoting together and, sharing their pain with each other. That's the one kind of thing that they can handle. And the other story that they can handle is that like white supremacy, very aggressive, dominant men or something like that. And when they talk to me and they feel like, oh, this guy isn't one of those, they just lose interest, basically. And so I very regularly have these journalists contacting me, having a conversation, and then nothing ever comes out of it, because that's exactly what the story that they're looking to tell. And so there's very little nuance in the mainstream. I think most people understand the depth and the breadth of these things. And people like Andrew Tate, unfortunately, take up a lot of space just because they're playing that role that the media wants to play. They're playing that mainstream thing. And I think we'd all do much better if we didn't bother listening to it's just a lot of hype and he's just living off that kind of attention that he's getting in the attention economy that we're running these days.
Yeah. So I have a picture up here on the slide. I don't know if you can see the YouTube feed or not, but essentially it says, what is masculinity? And I have two pictures that I think are, in a way, the common understanding of what masculinity is, or the way it has been portrayed, as you said, by those who disagree with men trying to find what true masculinity is. And that is, on the left, I have a picture of a man who is kind of being aggressive toward a woman and she's pushing him away, right? Or I have a man pictured there who is very muscular and he's in the gym. Now, a lot of people misunderstood. I'm not talking about gym bro culture, right? I'm not just talking about gym rats that like to work out and so forth. I'm talking about the what masculinity is and the perceptions of it in the mainstream, those who are critics of this kind of bro culture or bro movement, and, bad examples of it. So, do you see this, first of all? Do you see this in the critics and in the mainstream, and maybe even among men, to say, like, if I want to be a man, i.e. like Andrew Tate, I need to be aggressive. I need to put women in their place. I need to be loud and rude online. Are you seeing this also?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, I'd just like to say actually, Father Thomas, that like thanks for having this conversation, because I think it's important that we do have it, and I think it's so easy to just fall into those kind of like mainstream narratives, and so being able to just talk about the nuance in the situation, especially in the Orthodox Church as well. There are forces that are trying to derail and distract from this conversation, and so yeah, I absolutely do think that young men coming into the church from all kinds of different backgrounds, and many of them coming from rather extreme backgrounds. I've met guys who are coming from National Socialism, from vegan activism, and being football hooligans, stuff like that, right? All kinds of stuff. It's like surprise, surprise. Like the Orthodox Church is a hospital, and so it's a place for sinners, and so sinners are coming there. And so I came in with lots of different problems and challenges and issues. And a lot of that is often, a lot of us are carrying hurt and trauma from relationships with women, just as women are often carrying hurt and trauma from relationships with men. And so this is something that we're bringing in, and it's going to play out. It's going to, it's going to happen that we come into church, we have a conversation with someone, then someone's going to say something that triggers us, upsets us. We're going to misunderstand something. And so there's going to be painful, uncomfortable experiences, and this is why we're called, to love one another as Orthodox Christians, right? And so that's something that I think we need to use this as an opportunity to learn how to do better.
Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Let's be very forthright about it. Simon, I'm going to ask you to bring up the next slide here, and that is slide number 5. This is where this conversation is leading today, and that is men's recent interest in orthodoxy. Now, I've never been one to dance around issues or whatever. I never want to be rude. This is something that is again and again and again being noted in the media, that men are coming into the Orthodox Church in droves. I've been challenged on that. I've been told, well, it's not really happening, or there's just as many women as men. This is every anecdotal observation from every priest that I've talked to says that, if you sort of move away the families just for a moment, we're not talking about families, we're talking about young men and young women, and it does seem to be that more men are coming into the Orthodox Church than women. And that's what I tried to address last week, and there was a lot of offense taken to it. I'm sure that people are going to be offended by this also. So my first question on this slide is, how might some feel, or why might some feel, that this is a worrying development? You mentioned that some women might feel triggered. And I think we have to be honest about this. We have to say, and Paul, disagree with me if I'm wrong, we have to say that some women are traumatized by men. They have been traumatized through various relationships. They have, men are bigger than women. They have been, maybe, God forbid, beaten up, or maybe they were abused, or maybe they were taken advantage of. I have, many women in my parish, and when, I hear about this sexual abuse, I've talked about it to a certain extent on the show. So some women are coming in and seeing these men coming into the church, and they feel a little bit worried. Talk to me about that. Do you feel that that's legitimate?
Yeah, well, I think that, this problem is obviously far bigger than just the Orthodox Church as well. For several decades now, we have demonized, especially father figures or male leaders, in a way that's kind of like undermined and deconstructed and delegitimized any kind of strong masculine leader. And so I think in some cases, we've even lost the ability in our culture and our society to recognize a strong male leader who's virtuous and good, because it's so strongly associated with tyranny and oppression and stuff like that. So as soon as you say even just the words like, the first time I did a group, a men's group, and just brought together a bunch of men, and we spoke about like, how can we be the best kind of men that we can possibly be? Then we posted something online and people got really offended about it. Like, what, men meeting together just by themselves, that woman, oh, that's sexist, and who knows what. And so, we when we pointed out, we thought about that, and we're like, well, okay, well, we often see women doing this kind of thing, and that's generally okay, right? And so that there seems to be a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction in our society, which has also come into an orthodoxy to a certain extent. I think, I can understand the reactions as well, because also men have often lost the ability to lose. We're looking in a society today lost the ability to lead, because we're living in a society today which is really built on, if you look at the way that women are treated, and they're basically become like these little wheels in the economic machine that we can put, drive down wages lower, have more economic growth, neglected our children. And whose fault is this? Well, this is men's fault. Men are not taking their position to protect and provide for our society anymore. And so I think that there's been there's necessarily also a skepticism, and we're just all going to have to work a lot harder to get this to work. And this goes down from like the very high level conversations at a society, talking about the leadership society, and down to the individual family. And me and my wife, we can feel every single day as we're working out our salvation, trying to be unified and have a harmonious family, be role models for our children, that we're also struggling with these things. And so it's something that needs to be worked on at every single level of our lives.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And again, a man here, let me ask you a question. If a man wants to reject the message that was given to them by certain corners of the Western culture that said, look, you need to be soft, you need to be feminine, you need to get in touch with your feeling, you need to act more in a way that is amenable to the feminine, get in touch with your feminine side. And of course, along with that, although I think they're related, but they're not the same thing, and that is the entire loss of the ability of some portion of the culture to even identify what is a man and what is a woman, right? Like, these things are happening in parallel, but the message to men that said, oh, you have to be more feminine, you should not be, and it was that sort of toxic masculinity. Do you think that men may have overcorrected in certain circumstances where they felt like, all right, I don't want to be like a woman, therefore I will be, in fact, super aggressive and super rude, and I'll put men down, and, my job is to, in a way, put women in their place?
Yeah. I really think so I've been working full time with this now for some 7-8 years. And I find that just using these words masculine and feminine, especially in kind of like a man's life and how he's forming his character or trying to live his life, it's often just a derailment. I definitely don't subscribe to the idea that men need to be more feminine or get more in touch with their feminine side or something like that. I think that's a strange idea that doesn't seem to lead to anything good for men. I've tried to do that myself before I became a Christian, and I don't see it led to anything useful and worthwhile. I think it leads to what's I would call the flow boy syndrome, people who kind of just float along with life and don't really have any clear center. There is something about the conversation of vulnerability. I'm really sick and tired of what most people talk about vulnerability regarding men, because what it often leads to is people on social media sharing way too much about their personal struggles and challenges.
Right.
I really believe that every man should have at least one other, and preferably just one or two other very, very close friends in their life that they're able to share anything with. And actually, I think the place I'm increasingly realizing that a man should learn this is with his own father. I think it's with your father. It can be a biological father or a spiritual father. This is where you really come with the things that are painful, that you're difficult, you're confused about. You don't know how to move forward in your life. That's where you actually come. So when you're in that position of a son and you're learning to be a good son and to be obedient and to submit to a father, I think that's a place where we can talk about vulnerability. But generally, a man in almost every area of his life, he's going to need to develop the kinds of qualities that's going to help him to pick up a heavy load and to stumble uphill with it, as Jordan Peterson would say, right? And that's something that's way underrated. And certainly like learning to dive into your traumas and be vulnerable and open about all the pain you're having and stuff like that. That's not going to help men. It's endless. It's bottomless to start going into that kind of thing, and sharing it publicly is certainly not advisable either.
Yeah. I agree. I think the right word that men need to, if there's any virtue that they should be looking at, that women tend to be, at least in some women tend to be, is this idea of empathy. I think, and this is very scriptural, that we, love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love our neighbor as ourself. That in that is that embodiment of empathy. And I think men being able to empathize with the other without losing the quality of their gender, right, I think is extremely important. I think the Lord Jesus Christ, is sort of the greatest example of empathy. All right, let's go back to, if you don't mind.
I can just add a little bit onto that, Father
That'd be
Michael.
great.
I would go a little even further and say, like, the path for most men, you can become a monk, or you can become, you can get married. This is our path to salvation. And the path of getting married is really to learn how to not just empathize with your wife and your children, but to actually put their needs and their flourishing far above your own needs as well. And so it's actually like to completely decenter your attention away from yourself and your own selfishness, and to really take on responsibility for every single aspect of your family's life. And so it's even far more than just empathy. It's about, realizing what I am is just a useless servant who's trying to do the things that is his duty to do, which is really to be supporting and providing and being there for his family. And there's nothing more masculine than that, if you want to talk about masculinity. But it's not a man who's obsessed about how masculine he is in any way, right? Because he's not even thinking about himself.
I love it. Absolutely. All right. We do have a lot of comments that are happening in the live chat. Again, if you have a specific question for Paul, just go ahead and just maybe highlight that, just say question, and we will answer that out there. I know that Simon is putting a lot of the comments out there as we're moving on. Simon, if you can, put that slide back up, number 5, men's recent interest in orthodoxy, and let's talk about this, because this is going to lead us to the next, you might say, problem or situation that we found ourselves in, and that is, why are men being attracted to the Orthodox Church? Again, it's undeniable that this is happening. There are countless numbers of stories that have been done on this. There are internet debates, just so many of them, about men being interested in the Orthodox Church, and of course some other traditional churches too. But give us your commentary on that. You are one of those men. Why were you attracted to the Orthodox Church, and how does it inform your idea of masculinity?
Yeah, well, I'm part of what
in
you
2 minutes or less.
In 2 minutes or less, yeah, great.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, no, I'm part of that pipeline, one could call it, from kind of like through Jordan Peterson. He said something once, which was, You have to take the stories of the Bible seriously. You can't just write them off as kind of like silly superstition. And that got me, that kind of was like, oh, he's actually right. I'd been writing off the Bible as an atheist for many years as silly superstition. And so when I came into Christianity, I started looking for a church. And I had no idea Orthodoxy existed, but the first time I heard about it was a good friend who said to me, he said, Paul, you should check out the Orthodox Church. They have the original transmission from Christ. And there was something about that really caught me. It was like there was a personal handing over of something mystical somehow through the apostolic succession that had come all the way down through the priests today. And that really caught me. And so when I eventually, maybe over a year after that, got to visit an Orthodox church, I just felt in it straight away that there was something very different. And for me, I had been looking for good men because I worked with men. I've grown up with men. My entire identity has been formed with other men. And so I was looking for other good men. And when I met the guys there in that church, I could just feel there was another quality there. They weren't trying to please me. They weren't trying to impress me. They weren't trying to entertain me, which I think is some of the big problems that we're having from this society and some of the issues we've been talking about so far. And they were just there to share the truth with me. That was all that they were up. That's all they were interested in, is sharing the truth with me.
That's a really amazing testimony, because you obviously had this open heart. You were looking for the truth, maybe about yourself even, and you found it in Christianity and the Orthodox Church. Now, that kind of brings us to the maybe a little bit of an unpleasantness, and we're going to go to the next slide here. I know that a lot of people saw this headline, and the headline it kind of blew up because it was an article written by the BBC, and it says, young U.S. men are joining Russian churches promising absurd levels of manliness, right? Young U.S. men are joining Russian churches promising absurd levels of manliness. And they highlighted some Orthodox priests. This is not the point here. The point is to say that now, one could say that this was just a hit job, right? This was just, one woman, it's Lucy Ash was the journalist, was just trying to smear Orthodox Christianity, right? It's just a journalistic hit job. But I think that to a certain extent, there was and is on what we sometimes call the Orthosphere and among Orthodox YouTubers and so forth, the perception that there is a kind of Orthodox masculinity, right? Like there's a particular Orthodox masculinity, like it might be weightlifting, or it might be, asserting the headship of man over women, right? Like really trying to almost oppress women. I'm sure that you saw this whole kerfuffle over this, and we are going to look at the words of Bishop Irenee, who responded to this. But what was your response? What were your thoughts when you saw this story?
Well, this was great because this was actually taken up by Danish media as well. There was like 3 newspapers and a television channel that picked up the story from the BBC and then ran with it as well. And, I think, you're probably right. They were probably trying to do a smear job. But I think that for most people, they actually, I think it really missed the mark if that was what they're trying to do, because there was, most of the article was actually okay. I think the video that it's referring to was really just made as entertainment. So there is a video where something about absurd levels of manliness. Obviously, that's not a serious Orthodox priest saying like that's what you're going to get if you come into Orthodoxy, but it is a kind of tongue-in-cheek take on it, and it's very obvious that that's what it is. And so I really, the way I saw this is just like, yeah, they're trying to smear it, but like, glory to God, because this is not, there's so many people who have seen the holes in the culture and the confusion around masculinity. And so that this is just bringing a bit more awareness to Orthodoxy, because, a lot of people still don't know what Orthodoxy is. And so I don't see it as that problematic, actually, to tell you the truth, especially here in Denmark, where, we've never had Orthodoxy so much in the media as this BBC article provoked, right. Which just shows me like we're living in a very interesting time right now where Orthodoxy, it's hard for me actually to understand why it is. For all of human history, it's been almost impossible for Danish people to become Orthodox. And suddenly the doors are opening and people are flooding into the churches. And why is that? I don't understand it myself, really. I don't understand it. But something is happening, and I think it's important, and I think we need to be attentive to this moment somehow and realize that, there will always be people trying to smear and undermine the church. And that's an opportunity for us to learn how to grow in our faith as well, by giving glory to God and by, seeking his will and making sure we're not trying to engage in the political discourse and whatever it is, but looking at how we're engaging the church with our own lives and our own families.
Yeah, I have a family in my parish whose father, the husband's father, is a priest in, and I apologize, but I know it's in one of the Scandinavian countries, and he is saying the same thing. He is saying that I think their church holds 50 people, and they have on average now every Sunday 200 people. I think the one thing that we can acknowledge is this is far beyond one YouTuber or, sort of like even a pipeline, if we talk about, the Jordan Peterson Peugeot pipeline or whatever. I mean, only God can somehow do this, right? Like only God can move the hearts of men. And this is what I was trying to say like last week is like, women also need to have this kind of openness to the Spirit of God. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying that there's a little problem with the trend, right? The problem with the trend is that women are kind of, some young women, let me rephrase that, some young women are going in a one direction and other young men are going in another direction. So I agree with you. Glory to God that this is happening. Now, let's read. And I do have 3 slides here. Usually I don't read that much, but let's go ahead and read Bishop Irenae's response. Now, Bishop Irenae is the Rocor Bishop of London, right? He's the Rocor Bishop of London. And this journal, this BBC journal, falls under his geographic territory. So that's why he responded. And so he says this, the first slide of Bishop Irenae. He says, so there have been a few reports of late, including this most recent one currently making the rounds, about a number of young people converting to Orthodoxy, particularly young men. Okay? Converting because they find in the Orthodox Church, according to these reports, an environment that preaches masculinity, quote, and real, quote, manhood. And I want to say that if you're here because you think that's what we are here to do, then you are a fool. This is stupidity. Masculinity, so far as I am aware, is not an Orthodox term. It is not a term that has any traditional place in Christianity. It is a term embraced by the secular world because this world has rejected normal concepts of humanity, in which, of course, there is male and there is female, there is child, there is adult. These are simply human beings. But because the world has lost sight of the basics of what it means to be human, it is forced to respond to the lack of clarity it has pushed on itself by fostering these concepts of, quote, femininity, masculinity, and so on. Next slide. But if you are here because you think this is a place where you can reinforce some cultural masculinity, if you're here because you think this is the place to rebel against what you see going on politically around you or socially around you, please keep on going. Go somewhere else. We are not here for this reason. We preach one thing and one thing only, the gospel of Jesus Christ our Lord. We preach it without fear and we preach it without agenda. Our only goal is that every single human being might become a living image of Christ himself, that men might become Christ-like men, that women might become Christ-like women, that children might be true children of God, that the aged might find the real respect due to those who live long or long live and struggle for Christ, that this world might come to understand what it means to be redeemed. Last side of the quote. All of these other characterizations of Christian life and characterizations of church life, the thing they all have in common is that they seem never to be religious at all. Their only interest is in social and political questions. Quote, what are your views on masculinity, on sexuality, on politics, on government, on war? Do not come here if those are the questions that drive your life. Come here for one reason, because you are aware, somewhere deep inside of you, best quote right here, that something is wrong. Something is wrong with you, with me, with the world in which we live. And this something is called sin, and this is the place where it can be healed. If you come to this place because you think it's the spot to find a political ideology that matches yours, if you come here because you think we are going to preach some politics, some worldly mindset, as if it allies with the teachings of the church, please don't stay. This is nonsense. And if you're seeking that, keep looking. You'll never find it, and you certainly won't find it here. Whew. Where he says, come here for one reason, because you are aware somewhere deep inside of you that something is wrong. Something is wrong with you, with me, with the world in which we live, and this something is called sin. And this is the place where it can be healed. Every political ideology, and I'm talking about the bro culture, and I'm talking about feminist ideology. Feminist ideology has to die too, right? The hyper masculinity culture needs to die. What you are saying, Paul, is that men have lost their way and they're coming to the church to find out what it is to be a man because they have submitted themselves to it. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bishop Bernays really describes it incredibly well. And I think he finishes off that letter actually with, like, come for whatever reason, but stay for Christ. And for me, that really kind of hits the nail on the head. It's like, yeah, when we come in, we come in with all kinds of confusions and different things that we're struggling with. And so there can be many different reasons for us to end up in the church. A lot of us are really, have hit rock bottom somehow, right? And we're struggling. And so we're just really looking for something that we can hang on to that's not sinking with everything else. And for a lot of people these days, then this is going to be related to gender. And what you find in the Orthodox Church is not something that confirms your understanding about the problems and it's going to challenge every single conception you have about what the problem is, because at the end of the day, like, the problems is yourself. And so, that's a process. And in the meantime, there's going to be guys that are lifting weights, and there's going to be guys who are, doing all kinds of other stuff. And in general, that's probably not a bad thing. I'd rather have a guy who can develop a bit of muscle than not, right? Like he's also women are going to find that a bit more attractive than not as well.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. In other words, the mischaracterization, can happen on both sides. In other words, the world can look at what's happening in the church and take sort of one maybe a little bit errant or misapplied part of it and say, look, like those men are crazy. Those men are just demeaning to women. They are oppressive to women, and it's a Russian plot or whatever they're saying. On the other hand, we ourselves as men have to be convinced that this masculinity that we are looking for is not found simply in worldly pursuits, even if those pursuits are very healthy, staying healthy, lifting weights, shooting guns, whatever it is, right? Like these are good things, as long as we don't somehow think that is the sum total of what it is to be a Christian man.
Yeah. Father Thomas, I'm going to go somewhere where I hope you'll forgive me for this. It might be a little bit outside of the frame.
We're open here.
I actually just want to... Yeah, so there's this word orthobros that gets tossed around a lot and used a lot. And I've seen people have been asking about, can you define that? What does that mean? Orthobros, it's a combination of two very beautiful words. There's the word orthodox, and then there's the word brother. And I don't know the way out of this situation that it's now become a bit of a slur and a negative word for a lot of people. And then other people kind of in defiance embraced it and then almost get strengthened in some of maybe the negative characteristics of these misunderstandings of masculinity and stuff like that. So I just wish that we could, find a way to not use incredibly beautiful, positive words and turn them into something negative. It's kind of like the way we use the word patriarchy in our society and secularism to become the root of all evil is, the father, the rule, the patriarch is a beautiful word as well. And now it's become almost like toxic to just use it in many circumstances, right? And when I'm talking with my non-Christian friends, even sometimes my Protestant friends, I can't use that word. And so I think, we need to be careful. We need to be aware of these things, but let's be careful about using the word orthobros in such a negative way, because at the end of the day, it's two incredibly powerful, necessary things in a man's life. Orthodoxy is, that is a large part of what men need in their lives right now, actually. So when we start demonizing that word, we're actually doing a big disservice as well to people.
Yeah, I think that in the particular case, this we have to admit that, or let's put it this way, we have to not fall into the trap that people expect us to fall into, right? I think that's the problem. Let's be healthy and so forth. Let us be Christian men, but let's not be let's not be in a way doing what the world expects the worst of us to do. All right. I want to address some comments that are in the stream here. The first one is just the last one that I see here, and that is Patrick Theophan Barnes. So it says, I find the stream wrong-headed. Instead of welcoming young men into the church joyously, it is treating their conversion with the same worrisome development attitude that secular media does. I don't know what stream you listen to at all. I just, no one said that. I absolutely am in my parish. I'm experiencing the same thing. There's absolutely no one here that is saying this is a bad thing. And I think this is one of the problems that I encountered last week, and apparently I'm encountering it this week. And that is people are going to hear what they want, right? Listen to the whole thing. These are good things that men are embracing the Orthodox faith. And I'm saying there was a story in the BBC that was a distortion of what was really going on, and Bishop Irenae addressed it beautifully. Yeah. So, Patrick, I'm not sure what you heard, but that certainly was not the message. Paul, thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I can see some of where he's coming from, because we are allowing the agenda to be set. Like, you know, part of our conversation is taking into account all of the concerns of the people that are worried about aggressive and rude men and stuff like that. And, you know, online apologetics can be too aggressive. And so maybe that is something that somehow impacted our conversation. In our preparatory conversation to this, then we said, like, what we'd really like to do here is to help these kinds of people to just reflect a little bit more about, you know, if they are reacting negatively to young men coming into the church, then why is that not an occasion for joy and for celebration? And how can we maybe use it to reflect a little bit more on some of the challenges or some of the blind spots, you know, where we're dealing with, you know, maybe sins of the more right-hand side, you know, of kind of Phariseeism or pride or something like that. And so, because, you know, these are these sinners coming to the church, and Father Thomas and I really agreed about that. So I think that, you know, nothing is more fantastic for me when I see young guys coming to my church. And, you know, one of the most beautiful moments of my life is when the first guy came in, and I asked him, like, what are you doing here? You're a young Danish guy. Like, what's happening? And he said, like, yeah, I found Orthodoxy online, and I found out this is the one true church. And I just hugged him and I cried, actually, because it was just so beautiful to experience another man on this tiny little island in the middle of nowhere where I'm living who had the same insight as I did. And today he's my godson. And so it's a real beautiful story. And I'm overjoyed every single time it happens. And then the truth of the matter is that there are people who are concerned. And that's what we're trying to deal with here. And so if Patrick felt we were maybe a little bit too much focusing on that, then I can receive that and say, like, yeah, maybe I should share a little bit more of the joy and happiness and the excitement that I have about, like, wow, this is an exciting time to be living in right now.
It is. And I agree with you 100%. I just want to make sure that the entire show is not mischaracterized, because, you know, I'll give my own story. And that is, I have been amazed over the last 6 months. I have 2 young African-American men, very young men. They're both 18 years old. One walks across the longest bridge in Allegheny County. It's 2.5 miles long. He walks across the bridge to come to church. He just showed up one day and has never left. And then I have another young man whose parents are Pentecostal, and he reads philosophy and history, and he just sent an email one day, and all of a sudden he has his parents driving him to the church. Nothing could make me happier than the sight of these young men coming to the doors of the church and saying, this is what I want, right? Like, this is what I have been looking for. Of course, they're very young. And so one of my worries is, okay, there's a long path here, and let's make sure we know what we're getting ourselves into. But I agree with you 100%. This is a cause for great joy, but I do think that it's important, especially as a pastor, as a teacher, to say, let's make sure that we have the correct image of Christianity, of orthodoxy, of masculinity, and of femininity. All right. Yeah. So let's look at this last slide here and just kind of wrap things up. Paul, what what is the message to men about masculinity? What is the message to women about masculinity? What is the, what are we really trying to say here to everyone about the finding our true selves and our true nature of our male and femaleness in Christ and in the church?
Yeah. Well, I think the context of this message is that we're living in a culture that's very confused about masculinity. And the way that I see it, and this is my experience in coming into the church, is that masculinity, femininity, these are things that really just are describing a normal way of being for men and women. And so how do I step into this normal way of being? Well, what I found for me and my family, my wife and our children, is to really marinate our lives in the liturgical cycle of the church, to attend liturgies, to go to confession, to do morning and evening prayers, to try and prioritize going to the feasts, like the 12 major feasts of the church, to put aside time during Lent and during the fasts, to be able to pray just a little bit more, and to read the lives of the saints. These things that just allow my life to be kind of falling into this pattern of life that has been the healing balm on one's soul that's been prescribed and provided by the church for such a long time. And what I find is that as you do that, then all of these things kind of fall into place, and you don't have to. We have this tendency to over-intellectualize and to get lost up in concepts a lot of the time. And what happens as we just experience the life of the church and we get to know other members of the church and bump a little bit into each other here and there and stuff like that, and talk things through with the old ladies who are very helpful sometimes in putting the young men into place who don't understand things and whatever it is, but building a real fellowship of people and a community of people, then I find that all of this culture, this confusion and discussion that's happening, and Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and whatever, right? It all kind of just dies down a little bit, and I actually regain my attention back from it being sucked into all of these social media. And I find myself, like fixing that cupboard that needs fixing, and, repairing a tap that's leaking and stuff like that in my house. And it just connects me more to reality. And my wife sees me doing that, and she makes us a cup of tea. And then, we sit down after the kids are in bed and we have a good chat together, and we, read something from an Orthodox passage. And that's, I think, really what I see as the solution to all of this. It's a bit of it's an idea that's been blown up, and it's all very artificial, and it's driven by these media algorithms it's all just created all this confusion, and it's these extreme narratives swinging from the one side to the other side. And in Orthodoxy, what we just find is men and women learning how to be together in Christ, and that's really the solution to all of these things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You just put it so well. Amen to all of that. What about any writings that you might feel are important, maybe especially for these young men that are coming into the church? What would you recommend that they read in terms of what Christ expects of us as men?
Yeah. I'll mention a couple of different books that I found very useful. I think what makes a big difference, I've come from a very intellectual background. I studied political science at Copenhagen University, which is really an indoctrination in Marxist postmodernism, or neo-Marxist postmodernism. And kind of exists in this very kind of intellectual sphere for many years. And so for me, coming to Orthodoxy, it's really about unlearning a lot of rubbish a lot of the time. And so very useful for me was St. Paisios. I've read pretty much everything there is to read about him. I read especially he has, I think 4 or is it 6? I think has 6 volumes on his spiritual counsels, where volume number 4 is on family life. And that I reread 3 or 4 times, once a year. The first couple of years I came into the Orthodox Church, it was next to my bed, and I just read every night, and it was fantastic, and that's really, really valuable for me to get into. He's just an incredibly simple, truthful man, and his life story blows you away with the wisdom and the creativity of it as well. That just so incredible. So certainly St. Paisios, and it is by far the best of those spiritual counsels books, is on family life. And it can apply to every person in every situation, I think, as well. Secondly, after that, I think especially for men who are struggling with this issue, especially men who are maybe new in a marriage. I got married to my wife in the Orthodox Church shortly after we converted. And so St. John Chrysostom's volume, there's a little volume from SVS Press called On Marriage and Family Life. That's also really good to read and reread. It's really funny how the passages that I noticed the most in the beginning tended to be the ones about, what the woman should be doing about submitting, and how I've learned so much more. Now, all of a sudden, completely other passages are really popping into my attention, and I'm noticing a very different way of reading it. So it's really good to reread these things. We really need to grow in our understanding of it as well. So that's another one, absolutely. Right now, my wife and I are actually just going through Father Josiah Trenum's book on marriage preparation. It's intended for people who are not married yet, but someone gave it to us as a gift, and we're reading it together, and it's great. It's fantastic. It's very inspiring. And then I wanted to say, actually, for someone who does want to go a little bit more into the intellectual side of things, then I've had several conversations with Deacon Patrick Mitchell. He's written a book on the deaconesses issue, and he's also written a book about how Origen, at least in his understanding, Origen has influenced some of our thinking on men and women in a way where we kind of equate a little bit male headship with male domination. And so he talks about the archic relationship, which puts more emphasis on the source of two people who are actually completely equal to each other in every single respect. And I found that really useful and helpful. I'm not far enough in my theology studies to really be able to completely come to any conclusions about it, but I found it really helpful in trying to understand the Orthodox stance. So if someone wants to dive more into that, he has great writings online, and the book, I think it's called Origen's Revenge, and there's several stuff on his blog as well. I think that's worthwhile checking out as well.
Excellent. That's very, very helpful. Thank you for sharing that. Paul, before we go, and I want to thank you so much. I respect you so very, very much, and you added so much to the conversation. I think a lot of balance, and I maybe I overcompensated today because I got beat up so bad last week. I'm not looking for any sympathy, but I kind of wanted to make sure that I was representing those who felt marginalized last week. So tell us a little bit about your ministry. Tell us about your organization, Maniphesto, and how people can get involved, get in contact with you. What good things do you have coming up here?
Well, to the people who were listening to Bishop Irenaeus' letter and saying like, oh, the Orthodox Church isn't about strengthening your masculinity, then I can say, well, take a look at my website if they were disappointed about that, because that's kind of what I've decided to focus on instead. And I'm trying to do it in a way that's based on Orthodox principles, but really does look at the typical areas that we appreciate the most in men, the character traits that we appreciate most about men, which is about becoming competent and developing robust ability to stand and provide and protect for other people as well. So the way that I've been doing it, especially after Corona, we started running a network of online groups where guys formulate goals that they're working towards, and they actually hold each other accountable for reaching those goals. And so men are actually checking in daily with each other in these groups to make sure that they're making progress towards the goals that they're doing. It's something similar that I've helped start the same thing happening in the St. Paisios Brotherhood. I think they're called battle teams there. And I have something called Maniphesto Core, where guys are doing this. And the guys there find it incredibly valuable for just making sure that you're moving ahead with the things that you're working on in life. We try and one of the first things there's a couple of Orthodox groups that we have, and there we focus on, are you praying every morning and every evening? Are you going to church once a week? Do you participate in the sacraments? Are you going to confession? Those kinds of things. And then once that's in place, it's just a brotherly support for other guys who are on a spiritual journey together in growing in those areas of life. And there's some guys maybe want to lose some weight. Some guy might want to be launching a new business, or he's navigating, a difficult time with his wife or something like that, and looking for someone to talk a little bit more with. So those are the kinds of things that are happening in those groups. In just 3 weeks from now, I'm going to be holding a retreat, a men's gathering, which we're calling a man skills gathering here on the farm where I live. I live on a 360-year-old homestead out in the Danish countryside. We have about 50 guys coming, and it's going to be focused on developing classical man skills. So we have someone coming teaching about finances and economics, another guy who is an MMA fighter who's going to teach you how to survive a fist fight if you ever get into something like that. And then there's also going to be navigation with a map and a compass, and how to find or maintain humanity in a AI-driven workplace is some of the workshops that are going to be coming there. So a lot of different things happening there.
That's really important.
Around, we're calling that the path of manliness, is the brand that I'm running. So yeah, that's
excellent. Excellent. Paul Robson, thank you so much. The website is Maniphesto, maniphesto.com, for more information. All the best. I know you're going to be in the U.S. in October, so I hope to meet up with you then. I'm really looking forward to that, meeting you in person. Keep up the great work. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for contextualizing this important issue. It is important. We need everyone, right? We need men. We need women. We need to love one another and be patient with one another, care for one another, right? Very, very important. And so thanks for all that you do. Hey, for everybody that was in the chat, God bless you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. You guys are killing it every week. I love it. Not sure I'll be on next week. I am going to be in Arizona at the All-American Council. We're going to see how that works out. I hope to do something, but we haven't worked out those details yet. Hey, before we go, can you just click that like button? I would really appreciate that. Click the like button, share out the YouTube feed, please. We would love to hear from you. Also, support Ancient Faith Ministries with your gifts and your offerings. We do important work here, and so we would appreciate that very much. Paul, thanks again for joining us. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday. Share out our program when it's posted. Give us your feedback. Contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to hear about. Join us maybe next Tuesday, but definitely the following Tuesday. We are going to be talking about a new film that's coming out. You're going to love it. Join us on Tuesday at Ancient Faith Today Live. Good night, everybody.